All right, good morning. If I can have your attention just momentarily, this is your 15-minute warning before we begin this morning. So if you need that cup of coffee, you need to use the washroom, you need to text a few of your RM members to make it here from the trade show in the next 15 minutes, please do so. We're going to start right at 10 o'clock. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. If I can just catch you in the back, if you're just coming in the door, this is your 5-minute warning. So I am going to hustle you a little bit if you can make your way to your seat. This is your 5-minute warning. Thank you. I don't know how many times I can stress it. 5 minutes or else I'm hustling you in the back. So thank you. We'll see you for our program in 5 minutes.
I was born and raised on this farm and been here most of my life. Actually, the first year of school I was in country school, and then I went to Abernethy and Belcaris. I think I've always been passionate about rural Saskatchewan. Just really enjoy the lifestyle. Always what I wanted to do, and I guess I'm living my dream. We have a fairly small operation. We've got a herd of purebred Charolais cattle, and we've got about 70 head on the farm right now. And we farm about 1,000 acres. We grow canola, flax, oats, barley, wheat, whatever the flavor of the day is. I've been on Prairie Co-op Board for a long time. I was with the Calling Lakes Farm Stewardship Program that is underneath the Lower Capel watershed. And then I have also been involved in fire departments and the local Legion, Lions Clubs, 4-H. I've been with SAS Crop Insurance for about 16 or 17 years now. I worked for Mac Auction for the last few years, and that's a lot of fun. You get to meet a lot of people. Some farmers always come up with something that they've invented, and very interesting. So I've been pretty involved in the community basically all of my life. I was elected to the Abernethy 186 first, and then I was recruited and really encouraged to run for the second council. I think SARM is important to rural Saskatchewan because it is kind of the medium between local governments and provincial and federal governments, and it provides a lot of service to the RMs. I'm not scared of change. I like talking to people. I like listening to people, coming up with good ideas. There's always problems that come up, and it's really enjoyable working with other people to solve those problems and make life better.
SARM is my army. It's my cause. I'm very dedicated. Born and raised right here in Assiniboia. My family's been here since 1907. Listening to my grandparents talk about the early days certainly made me who I am. I'm a real history buff. If you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it, as well as your history tells you who you are, defines who you are. I can still contribute a lot. I have contributed a lot in the past, and I enjoy it very much. I've enjoyed everything I've done, so I consider my whole life a hobby. Farming, ranching, political. I've always said my church is out in the hills. It's a part of me. What better is there than to smell the native grass after a shower went through, or to hear the birds singing? It's heaven on earth. Well, my wife is very supportive, of course, very interested in what I do. Anytime I write a speech or something like that, I read it to her first to see if it passes the grade. A family's very important. If they're not behind you, you're toast from day one. I think the people define rural. It's always about the people. You won't find a better bunch anywhere in North America or even the world than the rural Saskatchewanians. Everybody was a little guy at one time, including me. But everybody starts out somewhere, and if I can give someone a helping hand to get going, I will. I do it for my grandchildren. I do it for the people of the area. I just want to make this a better place than when I got into it, and keep it as forward moving as I can, contribute what I can. I just like to help people out.
All right, welcome. Good morning. Good morning, good morning. For the 10th time, sit down. Right? My goodness, I don't know how else to put it nicely, but I'm getting some claps from up front because they've heard me say sit down 10 times, and they're already seated. They're great at listening. Good morning and welcome back. My name is Rusty Dean. I'm happy to be back here for day number 2. We hope this morning you had time to venture through our very large trade show featuring 154 exhibits at the ITC building. It will be open throughout the day and again for happy hour this afternoon. Speaking of happy hour, thanks to Municipal Hail, our sponsors of Happy Hour. There was a bit of confusion, and I'll apologize for that. I think I maybe made it sound like the drinks were free, and everyone was ticked off, and they had to cough up some cash for drinks. So I apologize for that. I have no intention of fitting your bill today. Neither does our farm, Twin Acre Farms. We're not fitting that bill. But today, we invite you back to Happy Hour. The appies are on us. The drinks you'll have to pay for. Thanks again to Municipal Hail. And again, sorry for the misunderstanding. Don't forget today, we're supporting stars once again. Please grab those 50-50 tickets. There is no option for $2, just 3 tickets for $5 because we are helping a good cause. Also, this is a note particularly for Quill Plains area. So Quill Plains area, you're having a weed meeting in meeting room 5 later this afternoon at 2 p.m. Again, Quill Plains area. I'll remind you closer to that start time. Also, on social media, please find us on Twitter and on Facebook at SARM Voice. We sure hope you can share your photos, your images, your videos of your time spent with us at the trade show and convention. As you settle in this morning, and I really mean settle in because the bear pit is coming, have your coffee and sip on it this morning. I'd like you to welcome SARM President Ray Orb. He will introduce the Premier Scott Moe. Ray.
Thank you, Rusty. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to kick off today's proceedings by introducing the Premier of Saskatchewan, Scott Moe. Scott was first elected to the Saskatchewan legislature in the 2011 provincial election in the constituency of Rossiter and Shellbrook. In 2018, he was elected leader of the Saskatchewan Party and sworn in as Premier of Saskatchewan. And Premier Moe was born and raised on a grain farm between Shellbrook and Parkside, and he and his wife Krista currently reside nearby in Shellbrook. Premier Moe and the Saskatchewan Party government are committed to driving the strong economic recovery in Saskatchewan. And these priorities include a focus on increasing Saskatchewan's exports to generate opportunities for communities, create good jobs, and further grow Saskatchewan's economy. So Premier Moe is dedicated to advancing the economic interests of Saskatchewan through strengthening Saskatchewan's high-quality agriculture, mining, manufacturing, and energy industries that meet the needs of growing markets around the globe with world-leading efficiency and sustainability. Please welcome Premier Scott Moe.
Well, thank you so much, Ray, and welcome everyone, SARM delegates, the directors, my legislative colleagues, the people I work with each and every day. Welcome to yet an in-person SARM meeting after far too long. But to all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning to you. It's an honor for us as your government to join you here today. It's a real pleasure to finally be with you in person rather than on a computer screen. And I say that full well knowing that in a very short period of time that we're going to be in the bear pit, likely taking a few lumps from each of you, but I would far rather be in that bear pit here in person listening to the priorities of your community and your council as opposed to doing that online. I would also take Premier's prerogative in advising you to direct the bulk of your questions to the Minister of Agriculture, Dave Merritt, Everett Hindley, Rural and Remote Health, or Highways with Fred Bradshaw. And that has been the consensus of the bulk of Cabinet, and we would hope that you could give that some thought between now and then. But much more seriously, we do appreciate this engagement, really appreciate the Bear Pit session. It gives our Cabinet, our caucus, your government, a great opportunity to have a peek into what those priorities are in various areas of the province, what those priorities are for your council, and also what those priorities are for your community that you ultimately represent. And so it's tremendously beneficial for us, and I hope it's beneficial for you as well. Ladies and gentlemen, this gathering, the size of this gathering, at this point in time after the last, what we've seen happen in the last 2 years, it's a great sign that things are getting back to normal in our province of Saskatchewan. The last speech that I gave to a gathering of this size was almost 2 years ago to the day, and it was at this very convention. And as you know, in the days after that, we recorded a COVID case here in Saskatchewan, and we were into the start of what was a very unusual time. But I think there was a sense in this province, and even a sense in this room that particular day, despite all the unknowns that we were going to face, that somehow we were going to find our way through this. Somehow the people of Saskatchewan would most certainly yet again come together. We'd meet the challenge, and we would rise and do what we always do when we're faced with adversity in Saskatchewan. There is many challenges that we face, whether it's floods, fires, drought, unforeseen tragedies that we face. We rally and we support one another. We do it each and every time. We do it in part because of you. We have strong leadership in our communities, and we have strong leadership at the municipal level. We have reeves, we have councillors, we have administrators that are serving communities across this province. And so this morning, on behalf of all of my colleagues in the entire government of Saskatchewan, I want to just take a moment and say thank you. Thank you for your leadership, most in particularly that leadership the last couple of years. And we're very thankful for the partnership, the strong partnership that we have with SARM, with all of our municipal organizations, but most importantly, the partnership that we have with you. And I think we can all acknowledge that it's served this province and served the people that we collectively represent well for so many years now. Delegates, this morning I want to go in and give you a little bit of an update on where things stand in Saskatchewan today from our perspective. And I'll look ahead, yes, to the upcoming provincial budget, and I want to talk about why I and our government are so optimistic for the future of this place. Even today, with all that we face in the world today, in Saskatchewan, but what we also are facing in our nation and around the world, I want to tell you and I want to talk to you about why I think Saskatchewan's next decade will be a decade of prosperity and progress, and it's largely going to be led by rural Saskatchewan. But before I get too far down that road, there's a couple of topics that I do want to touch on, and the first is the war in Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, I have no doubt that everyone in this room is appalled and quite frankly horrified by what we are seeing and what's happening in Ukraine today. The impact of that war is felt deeply here in Saskatchewan, with about 15% of our population is able to trace all or part of their ancestry back to Ukraine. These are our friends, these are our neighbors, these are our colleagues, and in many cases, these are our family. And I think all of Saskatchewan feels the pain that's being caused by the leader, the Russian dictator's brutal and unprovoked attack on Ukraine. And this morning I want you to know, under no uncertain terms, that the government of Saskatchewan and the province of Saskatchewan does stand with Ukraine and will always stand with Ukraine. And that support includes welcoming refugees who are fleeing that violent area of the world. We've committed to taking an unlimited number of Ukrainian people into Saskatchewan. We'll support each and every one of them that we can get to this province, and we're grateful for the assistance of the various settlement agencies that we have across Saskatchewan, all of the community groups, the churches, and all of the individuals that are stepping forward to support these people, our Ukrainian friends, in this effort. We're working closely with the federal government to ensure that newcomers will feel at home. First of all, we can get them here. But second of all, that we're able to integrate them successfully into our communities, whether it be for a short period of time or whether it be on a more permanent basis. And I want to thank all of you in this room, and through you to your family, your friends, and anyone you see in your community for your efforts in advance of this effort that your provincial government is undertaking. And I know that you will welcome these people into your communities, because that's what we have done for the past decade and a half now in Saskatchewan. We've seen our population grow by about 160,000 people. People have come to Saskatchewan from 184 different countries, and they're looking for opportunities for themselves, and they're looking for a better life, and they're finding it here in a Saskatchewan community. They've settled from 184 countries into 453 different communities in our province. One last comment on this Ukraine crisis before I'll move on. These terrible events that we're seeing on the news, they are a wake-up call for all of us, and really provide us with a moment of clarity. We're reminded again that freedom is hard won, and it must be defended, and defended at times with great cost. And we owe so much to the Ukrainian people. The heroes that seem to be everywhere on the ground over there, they're inspiring the world with bravery, and they're inspiring people in our nation. And I want to include among those heroes the farmers that you see that are literally going out with their tractors. They're hooking up to Russian armored personnel carriers, and they're towing them away. If this war goes on too long, those Ukrainian farmers will have a formidable army of their own. My friends, it's inspiring to see what the Ukrainian people are doing over the course of the last few weeks. But there's been some lessons for all of us when it comes to trade as well. Hard lessons, I would say, for Canada, and I would say for the broader North American continent as well. It turns out that it really does matter where you source your energy. It turns out that it really does matter where you choose to buy your potash or your uranium. It really does matter where in the world you are investing your money in technological advances for your industry. It really does matter where you buy your food from, and it really does matter who you choose to do business with. Prime Minister Trudeau, he was right, and there's something you don't hear me say, in particular at a SARM convention. But Prime Minister Trudeau was right to ban oil imports from Russia. But you have to wonder, why in the world were we ever buying oil from Russia in the first place? I would further that, why are we buying from Saudi Arabia today? We have in this nation, we are the 5th largest oil producer in the world. We have the 3rd largest oil reserves of anywhere on earth. We are today in this province and in this nation producing some of the cleanest energy that you can find anywhere on earth. It doesn't make any sense for us to be looking abroad, and it's time for us to get serious in this nation and on this continent about energy security, and it's time for us to equally get serious about our food security here in Canada. If there's one thing that the last number of weeks have taught us, is that we continue to live in an increasingly dangerous world, a world that now more than ever needs the clean, sustainably produced resources that we have. But we also need to ensure that we are part of a sustainable supply chain. If anyone hasn't had challenges with supply chain management in the last number of years, or the last number of weeks even, they most certainly have. We have in this province and in this nation the food, fuel, and the fertilizer. It's produced sustainably, and it can be supplied reliably from a trustworthy trading partner. Not everyone is learning this lesson as quickly as we might like them to. After the invasion, we saw the Biden administration. They looked to, very quickly, went to look to Venezuela, to Saudi Arabia, and even looked to Iran for more oil to fill the Russian gap, when they should have just came north of the 49th parallel and looked to Canada to fill some of that gap. But there is common sense emerging, of all places, on Twitter. Again, another thing that you don't hear me say often. You see, there are more people that are calling for the resurgence of the conversation around Keystone XL. And I would add energies to that conversation. Not only is it time for the U.S. to consider buying more energy from Canada, but it's time for Canadians to consider buying more energy from Canada. The time has come for us to emphasize our North American energy security. The time has come for us to emphasize our North American food security, and in doing so, ensure that we have continental economic sovereignty. If we don't take care of this, no one else is going to do it for us. We don't want to see ourselves in this province, in this nation, or on this continent in the same position of vulnerability or the same predicament that we see many nations in Europe in right now, relying on Russia for over a third, in many cases, of their natural gas, of their coal, and yes, they do burn coal in Europe, and their crude oil. In Saskatchewan, we've been making this argument for a number of years now. We've been telling our friends in the United States each and every time we're in DC, and we'll be there in a month or so to reiterate that story. We've been telling the world, and we'll be in the UK and in Europe very shortly, marketing Saskatchewan products, and we'll be telling them again about our sustainably produced products, as well as the reliable supply chain that we have. If you're worried about the environment, if you're an international customer and you're worried about the environment, if you're an international customer and you're worried about sustainability, rightfully so. If you're an international customer and you are searching for geopolitical stability of your supply, if you're looking for a reliable source of oil, of natural gas, of potash, uranium, canola, increasingly canola oil, wheats, oats, peas, lentils, barley, copper, helium, or lithium, and the list goes on and on and on, then you should not only buy from the nation of Canada, but you should buy from the province of Saskatchewan, because we fill and check all of those blanks. Delegates, this underscores precisely how indispensable Saskatchewan is, and our resources are, and our people are to the world. And what we need now is just a touch more pragmatic approach in the policy development at the federal level that maybe reflect on the urgency that we're seeing in Europe at the moment. A first good step would be to bring down a number of barriers to growth and development of those sustainable industries in this nation. And we need to ask ourselves 3 questions. Is this the right time to impose and on April 1st increase a carbon tax? Is this the right time for us in this nation to seriously look at banning oil tankers off the west coast of Canada? Is this the right time for us as a national government to make it more difficult to build a new pipeline or build a new mine or a new manufacturing facility? And the answer to each of those questions is no, no, and most certainly not. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an opportunity in this nation and in this province, and we have more than an opportunity. I would say that we have a responsibility. A responsibility as Canadians to be a supplier of choice to Western Europe, to Asia, and to the rest of the world. Saskatchewan most certainly is stepping in, and we're taking this opportunity, and I'm going to talk about that a little more in a minute. But we should do this as Canadians, and we should live up to the grave responsibility that we have set as a standard as Canadians. One more item before I get to the economy and the budget, all the interesting stuff. And I won't say anything you told me not to say, Donna. This is respect to COVID, and very, very short comment on COVID. You know, we removed all the public health orders at the end of February. Since then, we've now, as this past Monday, removed the emergency order that was in place so that we could reallocate healthcare staff to vaccination clinics, to testing clinics. Folks, in no way are we claiming that COVID is going away. It's not. It's going to be with us for a while, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to manage the risk of COVID, but we need to do so at an individual level. You are doing that, and so today in Saskatchewan, we're getting our lives back together, back to normal. We have 0 COVID protocols in Saskatchewan today. That's long overdue. That's all I have to say about COVID today. Delegates, it's been such a whirl of activity over the course of the last number of months, and that continues up to and including yesterday with President Zelensky's address of the federal parliament. And if you didn't see that, I would encourage you to find it and have a view of it. But in Saskatchewan, it's easy, with all of this going on, it's easy to overshadow some of what is happening in a very positive nature here in this province, and that begins with what's happening in our economy, in our communities. There is a tremendously strong recovery that is underway in Saskatchewan. We've added more than 30,000 jobs this February relative to last February. That's the highest unemployment growth in Western Canada, second highest in the nation. We have an unemployment rate of 4.7% in Saskatchewan, again, second highest among all provinces. It's the lowest unemployment rate that we've had in this province since April of 2015. Manufacturing, sales, wholesale trade continue to grow. Last year, our exports hit a record, yet again another record. $37 billion of export value went out of this province to countries all around the world. Ag exports leading the way, up nearly 7% in our agricultural exports last year. Forestry, up to $1.8 billion, up 60% year over year in our forestry exports. Now, obviously, as we look ahead this next year, we had a drought in many parts of this province, too many parts of this province, and our ag exports by volume are going to decline, but we're seeing the price climb, and that will offset by value some of that decline. Commodities were on their way up previous to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but that unrest is certainly pushing them higher, a lot higher in the case of almost everything that we produce here in Saskatchewan, our natural resources. We know that higher commodity prices are a double-edged sword for all of us. They affect both the revenue and the expense line of your business, of your RM Council business, and they do the same with the government of Saskatchewan. If you look at fuel and fertilizer prices today, I think we can all agree they affect both lines and quite significantly. Today, our potash industry, our existing producing potash industry, is ramping up its production to fill some of this backlog around the world. We see Cameco, who has announced the reopening of their Key Lake Mill and their McArthur River Mine. That will mean 900 people will be returning to work in Saskatchewan, many of those from communities in the northern portion of our province. We see WTI that has gone into triple digits again, far better than the negative 750 we saw a number of months ago. Into triple digits, I believe just pulled out of that a little bit yesterday and today, but we're seeing great strength in our energy prices, and that is positive for many communities here in Saskatchewan. Here's another sign of incredible growing confidence in what we are doing in Saskatchewan, and I think incredible confidence that we can have in the future of our province. There has been an unprecedented surge of investment dollars that have flowed into this province in just the past year. $13 billion of them. $13 billion, thousands of jobs being created. We're moving up the value-added chain when it comes to agriculture with a historic expansion in the canola crush industry. We see Viterra and Cargill have announced facilities right here in Regina, east of Estevan. We see Ceres International has announced the construction of a new facility at their Northgate terminal along the U.S.-Canada border. We see Richardson International doubling the production of their project in Yorkton, and we see FCL and AGT have teamed up to build a $2 billion integrated agricultural complex out by the refinery here in Regina. Part of that is a $360 million canola crush and renewable diesel plant. Just east of Saskatoon, we see BHP moving ahead with their Jansen project, the largest potash mine ever built in the world, the largest single investment that we have ever seen in this province. And BHP, the largest mining company in the world, has also mentioned that this is the largest single investment that company has ever made. This is building on a massive expansion that we have seen over the course of now close to the last 2 decades in the potash industry. And given, when you look at the global situation around where potash comes from, well, it comes from Russia and Belarus. They're major players in this industry. They're competitors for us. And the future of Saskatchewan's potash industry, I think, given today's current events, looks very strong, very bright as being a supplier of choice. Finally, we're about to see the most significant expansion in our province's forest industry, in fact, the most significant expansion ever. Nearly $1 billion are being invested in the forestry industry, going to result in north of 3,000 jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, as we find our way out of this pandemic, and most certainly our economy is finding its way, it's back on track. There's growing momentum, and you might ask, what does this mean for next week's budget? And this is where I'll be careful, Donna. What it means at the highest level is the government will continue to be able to invest alongside you at times, invest in your community, and also move much closer to balancing our provincial budget. This builds really on what we've accomplished over the last decade and a half together. In this budget, you're going to see significant investment in healthcare, specifically on surgical wait times and recruitment and retention of healthcare workers with a specific focus to ensuring that not only are we not losing services in our rural communities, but the few that we have lost temporarily, we're going to get them back. We're going to get them back very quickly. You'll see a major commitment to reduce the wait times that we have, the surgical wait times. We're expanding our operating room hours. We're expanding them out of the major centers into some of our regional centers so that we can utilize our entire provincial surgical capacity. We're hiring private surgical providers to augment the services of the public system so that we can, yes, catch up from some of the backlog that we've acquired over the course of the last couple of years. We do this in laboratory services, and we've done this with our surgical initiative before, and we're doing it again. The pandemic demanded so much of our healthcare workers, and they deserve our greatest gratitude. Since 2007, we have worked very hard on recruiting and retaining healthcare workers. And I say we because many of you in this room and many people in your community have been part of that effort and that initiative. It hasn't been solely the provincial government. In doing so, we have had successes. We have over 1,000 additional physicians that are providing services in Saskatchewan communities today relative to 2007. We have over 4,300 nurses of all designations, nurse practitioners, LPNs, RNs that are providing services in our communities across the province. I quite frankly can't imagine going through the last 2 years without those healthcare professionals in our system. I don't know how we would have done that. But we do need to do more. We understand that. And in this budget, you're going to see the first steps in the initiative to ensuring that we are going to do just that. In this budget, you're also going to see a renewed commitment to investment in public infrastructure, in addition to healthcare. Since 2007, we've invested about $37 billion in public infrastructure, hospitals, schools, highways, all of that. In the growth plan that we had put out, we have a target of achieving $30 billion additional dollars invested in public infrastructure by the year 2030. So in healthcare, yes, we're continuing to build long-term care facilities. We're building new long-term care facilities in Regina, Grenfell, and La Ronge, and replacement homes also coming in Watson and Estevan. New hospital in PA and Weyburn. When it comes to roads, where the construction season this coming year is going to be busy. We're going to improve another 1,100 kilometers of highway in the province. This puts us back on track to achieving our goal of 10,000 kilometers improved by the year 2030. A number of these projects are already underway, and they're underway in your area of the province. A stronger economy also means that we can continue to invest alongside you in municipal infrastructure through programs that we have like the ISIP program. And you're going to see in this budget more funding to support more projects in communities across Saskatchewan. Ladies and gentlemen, agriculture continues to be a major priority for you, I know, and it's a major priority for your government, and I want you to know that. It's been and it continues to be the very spinal cord of the Saskatchewan economy, and you're also going to see that reflected in this year's budget, and I think that's important given the challenges we had in agriculture last year. You know, yesterday at the legislature, we had a young lady visit us. Her name is Maddie Adamson. She has a YouTube page. It's on social media as well. It's called Learning About Ag with Maddie. I would encourage you all to go and have a look at one of the 55 videos that she has posted on there that take you through essentially the entire agricultural process, and really give you an insight into what rural life looks like in Saskatchewan. The reason she does this, and I asked her, is, you know, people need to know where their food comes from, and I want to tell them. And I would say so that she does this, and does this extremely effectively. She tells a story about agriculture in depth, and she tells a story about the value of rural life and growing up in a rural community in Saskatchewan. And I just would encourage you first to go have a look at a few of her videos, and second, I would encourage you to never underestimate the power of a young person, the power of their perception of whatever it is you're doing, but also the power of their voice. And I would encourage you, whether it be in your business back home, whether it be in your community, or at your council, within your council, at the council table or wherever that might be, to take Maddie's example and to look for opportunities to encourage youth beyond where they're already participating in your business community, and that includes at your council table. They bring a fresh perspective, and they bring a tremendously powerful voice. As we know, when it comes to agriculture, last year wasn't an easy year for this province. It was a challenging year for producers across the province, and I think that in many cases, and in some areas for sure, that greatly understates what actually happened. This drought was extremely severe in certain areas of the province, and the drought tested the resilience of all of those that were affected. Farmers, ranchers, processors, all of those that are actively involved in agriculture, it touched you. It tested the resilience of our families, of our businesses, of our communities, and really tested the resilience of the entire province. If we look back, our government, and thanks to Dave Merritt and other ministers, we responded as quickly as we are able through the existing business risk management programs that we have. We work closely, and Dave worked closely with the federal government. We were able to increase the agri-stability interim benefit from 50 to 75%. Crop insurance doubled their low yield appraisal threshold values very quickly. We provided $119 million in direct support for livestock producers across this province in short order, and last year crop insurance paid out about $2.4 billion. That's nearly 30,000 claims. The average, the 5-year average of claims paid out is under 8,000. So last month, Minister Merritt, he's already announced what our coverage levels will be for next year, and they are increasing, but we're hoping, as we all are in this room and across the province, that Mother Nature is going to cooperate with us a little bit better and add a little bit of rain to this winter snow that we've had, and we'll see those claims come down closer to the 5-year average, which interpreted means we get a crop, or at least an average crop. And in the budget, you're also going to see renewed support for agricultural research. We have some of the foremost agricultural research in the world is happening right here in this province. We're going to also use that Saskatchewan research to advocate for our industry around the world, but we're also going to, when necessary, use that research to ensure that we are defending our agriculture industry if necessary, if it was ever to come under any type of a regulatory attack like we have seen in the energy sector. Delegates, we're also going to answer a call from SARM. We're going to take some steps on an ask that came from the SARM board these last number of weeks, but I think it's been an eternal ask as well for a number of years now, and it's a concern I know for many RMs around the province, and that has to do with wild boars. Or pigs. They're big, they're bad, they're not too pretty, and they create a host of problems wherever they arrive. They damage crop, they damage pasture land, and they'll potentially could spread disease to some of the hog barns that we have operating in the province. So just so you know, your government most certainly has heard you on this issue, and we're going to respond. So today, what I'm announcing is a moratorium on all new wild boar farms in the province. Existing farms will be licensed, they'll be grandfathered, but no new farms will be approved in the future. Second, we're announcing that wild boars, also known as feral pigs, will be regulated as a pest under the Pest Control Act. That means you can use poison to get rid of them. Third, we're doubling the funding committed to the Crop Insurance Feral Wild Boar Control Program to support surveillance and eradication efforts across the province. Ladies and gentlemen, all of these amount to a very serious effort that we hope will help you control the wild boar populations that we have in our province. And in the coming months, we'll look and talk to you about the effectiveness of these programs, and we'll add to them or change them if necessary. One last item, and I added one more this morning, but one more official last item before I wrap things up. And this is actually a very important one. The last few years, we've taken many steps to ensure that our communities are safer, in particular our rural communities. We've created new crime reduction teams, which you've seen. We've expanded the Saskatchewan Crime Watch Advisory Network, and I thank SARM and I thank you for your participation in making that successful. We've created protection and response teams to help respond to rural crime, specifically crime in our most rural and remote areas of the province. We brought in new trespass legislation, but delegates, I think we can agree that this is not enough, in particular in certain areas of the province, and we need to do more because property crime is still far too present in many of our rural areas of the province, including where I live. In the budget, you're going to see funding to support a number of public initiatives that we had put forward in the speech from the throne last fall. We're adding 60 new police positions, 11 new civilian positions to support law enforcement and to work with law enforcement that is out there. We're creating a new Provincial Protective Services Unit, and what this is a range, essentially, of the provincial peace officers. This includes conservation officers, highway traffic patrol, our deputy sheriffs. We're going to bring them all in under one provincial command center. That's more than 300, I think over 350 officers that will be working closely to help you and help us protect our communities. There's some funding to support a number of other initiatives that I think in their own right will be quite effective at finding our way to even safer communities. We have a new drug and weapon trafficking response team. We have a warrant enforcement and suppression team to ensure that if there is a warrant out for your arrest, that you'll actually be found and you'll be arrested. And we're adding additional crime reduction teams in the communities of Meadow Lake and LaRange and Lloydminster, as well as in Moose Jaw. In addition to all of those measures, we introduced a number of amendments to our trespass laws, which came into effect this past January, and they put the onus on individuals to obtain permission to enter private property. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard that not everyone is thrilled with this, but we don't think it's too much to ask for someone to find out who owns a property, to contact that owner, ask for permission before they move onto the land to do whatever they're going to do. The vast majority of people, we understand, already do this because it's a decent thing to do, and for that we say thank you, but now it's the law. Delegates, long enough from a politician, so let me just close with this. In the last few weeks, it's become even more apparent than ever that, yes, we're living in uncertain times, the last few years. And I think that really understates where we are today. We haven't seen a war on this size or scale in Europe for 75 years. But as I mentioned earlier, the war has provided some clarity for all of us on many things, including one thing particular for us in Saskatchewan. In a world with a growing population, an expanding middle class, in a world that is increasingly concerned about environmental sustainability, in a world that today is yearning for geopolitical certainty and sustainability, in a stable democratic jurisdiction that respects the rule of law, a stable democratic jurisdiction that has an educated and dynamic workforce alongside strong infrastructure and is in the business of producing some of the most sustainable products in the world, is going to do very, very well. That is why, my friends, I believe this next decade is Saskatchewan's decade, and the world needs, quite frankly, more of what we have to offer. I'm confident in this more than I have ever been because of all of the things that I just mentioned. And something else that we have here, it's our character. In the first week of February, we all experienced an Alberta clipper here in this province. The snow was welcome because we're pretty dry, but there were some harrowing moments out on the highways and in certain communities for various people, and the response that we saw in Saskatchewan told me and should tell you everything we need to know about the character of people in this province. In Hague, Shelby Gertson, she operates a youth drop-in center. She did an interview during that storm, and she said this, and I quote, "I decided that I will open my doors, and anyone who needs to come in and get help can come in. And I put out a call to the community for food, and we have an awful lot of food." At Hanley, they opened the senior center for those that were stranded on the highway, and everybody played crokinole while the storm passed. In Langham, motorists gathered at the community center, waiting for the storm to pass. The town came in and bought them all pizza and fed them. Near Pence, there was an on-the-road rescue. Shannon St. Ange tells the story. She was driving with her head out the window about 15 kilometers an hour, and then she had to stop because conditions were just too poor. Shannon was worried, and understandably, and she was starting to get worried that she might die out there on the road that night. She texted a colleague, and she posted her location to a Google Earth location, and she put that into a Facebook group in the Pence area. Not long after that, she got a phone call. A gentleman named Andre Bouvier called her, and he was coming to help. So this is 80-year-old Andre Bouvier, who was having trouble getting his tractor started, so he started walking out on the road. When he got there, he told Shannon and some of the other drivers that had stopped that he would lead them to his farmyard on foot in this blizzard. And Shannon said he knew exactly what to do. He was calm, he was cool, he was collected, and he made me feel like the whole situation was under control, and it most certainly was. Everyone got home safely. Ladies and gentlemen, with everything going on today, it's very easy for us to feel distraught and depressed about all of this. But there is so much hope for us. There are so many Andre Bouviers in this world, and there's a whole bunch of them in this province. You see them in Ukraine, digging in for the very fight of their lives, vowing never to give up. You see them in Russia, good people risking their careers, risking their freedom, going out and protesting an unjust and a criminal war. And in Saskatchewan, as I said, you see them in every community across this province. They are our strength, and they are the driving force of this province, and they are the reason that we will be successful in the years ahead. We have everything we need, and most importantly, we have the people. So speaking of people, there's a bunch of people in this room, and myself and your government have a favor to ask of you today. As we know, there is a looming rail strike, and we've had far too many rail interruptions over the course of the last number of years, and we are without a doubt reliant on that rail service if we're going to achieve anything that I talked about here today. When you go back 15 years ago when you elected this government, a Saskatchewan Party government, one of the first things we did was we passed essential services legislation. What that did was ensured in this province, if there was a strike or a lockout, that healthcare services continued to be provided to Saskatchewan people. It ensured that our highways would continue to be plowed if there was a snowfall in the winter. It ensured that the power stayed on across our province regardless of the circumstances. These are all essential services in Saskatchewan. And I would put forward that so is the rail service, vitally essential to our communities. And I assume that you would as well. But it's not. It's not provincially regulated, and it's not an essential service. It's federally regulated, and I would put forward it needs to become an essential service. So today, I am calling on the federal government to, one, prepare for back-to-work legislation should they need it in the days ahead, and two, to prepare to designate rail service in Canada as an essential service, and ensure that this service can then not be interrupted by any labor dispute into the future. What I would like to do and what I would ask of you, and I will sign it, and I've talked to Ray, and I understand he will sign this as well, is to introduce a petition that we will deliver to the federal government, and I would ask for each of you to sign it here today. We will collect them, and we will deliver them to the federal government, and Ray and I will figure out how exactly we do that. I understand the MLAs that are here have a number of copies of the petition, and they'll be circulating it now, and if you would do us the favor of signing that petition, we'll collect them after the Bear Pit, and we'll deliver them to the federal government, and what the petition says is this. A petition to the Government of Canada. We, the undersigned residents of the province of Saskatchewan, wish to bring to your attention the following. The looming rail disruption threatens the movement of goods through this country. The supply chain is already stressed and experiencing performance issues because of compounding pressures like the pandemic, severe weather disruptions, and labor shortages. Rail service is an integral part of the supply chain, and industries depend on reliable service in this already challenging economy. Even a minor labor disruption will result in lost contracts, shutdowns, lost revenues, and reduced taxation revenues to the governments of Canada and Saskatchewan. Therefore, the undersigned call on the Government of Canada to 1, immediately implement back-to-work legislation should a work stoppage or disruption of rail service occur, and 2, introduce legislation to designate rail service as an essential service to prevent future rail disruptions that are caused by labor disputes. And so I'll sign that now. It'll be handed out. With that, I will close. Ray will move on to the Bear Pit, I believe, and we'll collect the petitions after, and Ray and I will somehow deliver them to the federal government.
I just like to say that it's not every morning that I got a call from the Premier, but I knew this morning there was something really important, so I did have that conversation with Premier Moe, and I'd be pleased to sign it. I believe I was interviewed yesterday by the media. They were asking about the strike, and I said this is probably the worst time ever that a rail company, a major rail carrier in this country, would go on strike. The implications are just terrible, and we are asking the federal government, the SARM board talked about this earlier on, about contacting the federal government to do something about it. But this is the best step, and I'd be pleased to sign that petition. And also thank you, Premier Moe, before we go on, for you addressing your cabinet, your government addressing the wild boar problem, and also the reduction of rural crime, which is really important to us as well. Okay? Thanks. Okay, so in the meantime, I'll ask your cabinet to come up here. Sure.
As we hello. Oh, hello. You might need to turn me on. Hey, Laurel, can you go tell Rod and turn this mic on? Go tell Rod and turn this mic on. I'm just going to roll the crowd while the ministers come up.
You go ahead.
All right, I just want to, hello, can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Okay, for those of you that are seated, I ask you to remain seated as our ministers come up, and as we continue to sign the petitions, SARM staff, the MLAs, will be collecting sort of in the center of the room. So as this process is happening and we prepare for the Bear Pit, I just ask that you remain seated, just so this isn't some stampede. So as you continue to sign, just keep passing it towards the middle. That is where our SARM staff and MLAs will collect the signed petitions. Thank you for your patience. This is going to take a few minutes. So again, thank you for your patience. Please remain seated. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to continue on with our bear pit. I would like to remind you, as you continue to sign, pass it towards the middle. A SARM staff and MLAs will collect it. If you're concerned because one of your delegates maybe is at, the trade show or missed signing the petition, we will have a few available to sign at the registration. Also, if it's somehow lost and stuck in the middle of your table, please return the petition to the registration. So thank you for your time. I will welcome back to the mic President Ray Orb to introduce the bear pit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rusty. I'd just like to thank Nelson Granite for sponsoring our timer for this session before we move on. And I'm going to ask, in a minute, I'm going to ask the Premier to announce or to, introduce all of his cabinet here. And so just a few rules. If you'd like to ask a question during the bear pit session, you have to line up at one of the numbered microphones. I know you're all familiar with them on the floor. And then I'll monitor the discussion and give you ample time to speak. So you must be a council member or administrator with permission of council to ask a question. Keep your questions answered short, and 90-second time limit for the posing of questions, and I believe there'll be a timer on the screen, so we'll be able to monitor that. And if you're running short of time, I'll give you a 30-second warning. Cabinet ministers, and this is important, have 3 minutes to answer. And I'll turn it over to you, Premier Mo.
Well, thank you very much, Ray. First of all, I would say that it's good to be back at an in-person bear pit, because as I look as the ministers came up on stage, it's just like grade 3, and they all go to the back of the room. They left our poor 2 health ministers right up front here. But I'll go through. This is my first test now. I didn't get a list of the actual responsibilities for each minister, so if I mess it up, I'm sorry. We're not doing a shuffle today or anything. It's just a mistake. We have over here in the front, in the red, Minister Eyre, Bronwyn Eyre, our Minister of Energy and Resources. Next to her is Gord Wyant. He's our Attorney General and our Minister of Justice, which in Saskatchewan is the same person. We have our Minister of Government Relations, Dawn McMorris. Behind Dawn is Laura Ross, our Minister of Parks, Culture and Sport. Next to her is our Minister of Education, Dustin Duncan, hails from Weyburn. I see Sean Davidson here, who I know will have 3 or 4 questions for Dustin. Maybe not at the convention, but after for sure. We have Laurie Carr from Estevan, our Minister of Social Services. Warren Kading is our Minister of Environment. Everyone, this is our Minister of Environment. Minister of Corrections and Policing is Chris Tell, who has done a lot of the hard work alongside with Gord Wyant on some of our rural policing initiatives that I spoke about earlier. We have Jeremy Harrison, Minister of Trade and Export, working hard on marketing our Saskatchewan products and opening up opportunities around the world. Paul Merriman, our Minister of Health. Everett Hinley, Rural Remote Health, Seniors, Mental Health and Addictions. Behind Everett, from the great community of Rosetown, avid Edmonton Oilers fan, is Jim Ryder. I told you I can't remember everything up here. I'm going off memory. Jim is our Minister of Sask Builds and Procurement. Next to Jim is Dave Merritt, who you all know in this room, our Minister of Agriculture, and I would say a great representative on behalf of rural municipalities within the government and the cabinet, as is Doug Steele, and Jim Ryder does a reasonably adequate job at that from time to time as well. Fred Bradshaw, our Minister of Highways, Water Security Agency. We have Dawn Morgan, another Dawn in cabinet, is our Minister of Crown Investment Corporation, all of the crowns. Donna Harpower, our Deputy Premier, Minister of Finance, and a true leader within cabinet, within this government, and a true friend of mine. Jean Mikowski, Minister of Advanced Education. And professional football player, retired. That is your cabinet, ladies and gentlemen. We look forward to the next hour and a half of engagement with you.
Okay, we're going to start it off at mic number 1. Go ahead, sir. Introduce yourself.
Dan Cugnett, Division 1 Counselor for the ARM of Weyburn. Just like to thank the Premier and the Cabinet for being here today. I've posed this at previous conventions. I've had conversations about this in private with some of the people on stage and other people in government, including my MLA and Minister Duncan.
Hedging oil.
I question why when we have countries like Mexico, or we have some of our largest publicly traded operators in the province in Crescent Point, Whitecap, Vermilion, Surge, even small little players in southeast Saskatchewan like Valley View Petroleums that have hedging programs for their oil, why the provincial government has not endeavored to explore further hedging its oil sales to take out some of the volatility that we see in these commodity prices, take out these spikes and lows, to give it a little bit more balanced. So I don't know if this would be for you, Mr. Premier, or for the Minister of Finance or Minister of Energy. To me, this is a matter of dollars and cents. And I'm not saying that you have to do it, but would the government consider putting together an exploratory committee to start to look at why we are not hedging our oil sales as a province? Because I think it would go a long way to helping you with your budget purposes each year. So that's my question. Would you look at forming a committee to explore this, please? And thank you.
Just say yes.
The provincial government has to abide by public sector accounting rules, and they're fairly rigid on what's allowed to use for your budgetary counting, and you can't deviate much for that, or the provincial auditor would cite our books as not being compliant. We don't actually sell the oil, so we only account for revenues through royalties, and so we don't own the product, we don't sell the product, so we can't hedge the product.
Well, respectfully, and I understand all of that, but I do believe that you could hedge it. It is a paper transaction, and I know that the regulatory environment for you accounting, isn't less stringent than what it would be on a Crescent Point or Whitecap. So I do think that there is a way, similar to, Mexico as an entire country has done this, and it's certainly helped them through the last few years. So I think that there is an opportunity to look at it further, and that's all I'm asking is, would the government look at it further?
Duly noted, and we'll see we'll get actually an opinion from the provincial auditor.
That would be wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Dan, we did do a little bit of work on this just actually in the last number of weeks as we saw some further fluctuations in the energy price to the positive. They were increasing. And there is a difference between the government of Saskatchewan captures royalties, doesn't sell the actual oil. And so there was a little bit of a challenge in how we cross-reference that with some of the public sector accounting rules that governments do need to follow, and they're there for good reason. But, given that we've done a little more digging on this, maybe it is time for us to recollect with a small group and just have a conversation about, what opportunities are there, and then we can decide if there is one and whether or not we take it.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the question and the answer. I'll go to Mike 3.
Morning. Thank you, Premier Moe. Arlen Kurtz, the ARM of Fertile Belt. Premier Moe, I want to draw your attention to the new Animal Production Act that is, my understanding is currently in the legislature, and particular Part 7 of it, which deals with regulations on impounding stray animals. Our municipality had some discussion with government people within the last year about regulations for this, and particularly talking about non-domestic animals, i.e. buffalo. Our municipality has fought with this problem of stray buffalo out running around for over 10 years. Unless you've dealt with buffalo, you have no idea of how to handle them, what you can do with them, and how can you impound these animals. The only way to move them is with a tractor. Municipalities need more power for such things as fencing. We did impound these animals last summer. They mysteriously got out of the fence they were in. We have no way of collecting the fees because we cannot put them onto taxes. These buffalo last summer were in a yard. The children were outside playing in the sandbox. They thought they were funny-looking cows in the yard. God help them if those buffalo and the kids had gotten mingling. It would have been a tragedy. Premier Moe, we who have dealt with this problem and we have asked for it and have not been granted it, need to be involved in regulations to deal with non-domestic animals. I'm asking you, before the regulations are drafted, that you promise me you will enact special powers that we can deal with them. These animals are at large right now. God only knows where they are because the owner doesn't know where they are. But will you guarantee me today that you will enact powers that we can deal with these animals for once and for all before we are standing in a graveyard beside children who have been killed by these animals?
I'm going to let Dave Merritt speak to the regulations with respect to the legislation that's before the House. I will say, however, that I've had similar conversations with respect to an area where I live. In fact, if the RM of Canwood is here, I think we've had a buffalo that have come down in out of the national park into yards and done a significant amount of damage. And they are a different animal than literally a different animal. But Dave, do you want to speak a little bit to the regulations and your engagement on where we're going with that piece of legislation?
Yeah, I can, and thanks, Arnold, for the question. That is something we are looking at. That's one of the things I know in history and in being on RM Council was what role of the municipality, what the council could and couldn't do. And that's why we're looking at it and put it all under one act to give the councils more power and to be able to do that and be able to also to collect the fees. That was always the issue around it. So we're looking at that and all part of the regulation side. And that process, I think it's received second reading, go through the process and hopefully pass later this fall. And we'll look at the regulations and make sure that everybody knows where we're at with it.
If any RMs have any advice on the regulatory package with respect to this, I would ask you to pass them at a council meeting sooner rather than later and get them to Minister Merritt's office.
So will he be in contact with us?
Yeah, we will be doing a consultation. You bet, Arlen. You bet.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go to Mike 2.
Thank you, President Ray. I appreciate the opportunity. My question or...
Just identify yourself, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Pardon me. My first time at this convention. Thad Trefiak, Reeve RM 247. I appreciate your comments very much this morning, Premier Moe, around our opportunity that has changed around the world's assumptions about things have changed. And we... my first thought was we shouldn't squander this opportunity on the backs of people and people who represent the bloodline that flows inside my body. So I appreciate it very much. Okay, I'll get back to the question because it's a practical question. It's not a direct RM question, but it involves our agriculture producers and their access to nitrogen fertilizer and the cost of that going forward. And I know there's been business cases tried to be made to try and create a new production facility, and those business cases haven't come to fruition because there's roadblocks around market assumptions and where things are produced in the world. We have an abundance of natural gas. We do produce nitrogen in this province.
30 seconds.
Yep, and I know the background around the discussions in cabinet around the ones that have come thus far. And are we looking at potential new opportunities because assumptions have changed around the world market in nitrogen fertilizer?
We've in general terms, we do need another nitrogen supplier in Western Canada. I think that's a fair statement to make. And we have been, through Jeremy Harrison's office, in touch with maybe not enough, but a number of individual companies that are looking at projects somewhere in Western Canada. Specifically for us, we're interested for those projects to be located in Saskatchewan. And we do have a number of new growth tax incentives that would be available for that type of investment. So we haven't seen one of those announcements yet, and I maybe would just back up a bit, and then I'll turn it over to Jeremy if he has anything to clarify. I mentioned the $13 billion that has been announced for investment into similar infrastructure projects as this. That's not the end for us. We're continuing to work on additional investment to come into this province. This is an example of one of those areas where we are working very hard to attract someone to invest and to increase our nitrogen production in Saskatchewan and in Western Canada. This is an example of additional investment that we most certainly think is available for us to attract here. Jeremy, any more details on that without too much detail, I suppose?
Yeah, no, sure. Thanks, Premier. We are working with a number of proponent companies that are looking at options in this space right now. And in fact, that's why we brought forward, as the Premier indicated, the chemical fertilizer incentive that provides a direct opportunity, financial incentive for companies to make investments into this space, because we feel that we have a comparative advantage in this space, given some of our competitors in other jurisdictions. So, that's obviously even more acute given the circumstances we've been seeing over the last number of weeks. But I can tell you, even as recently as a couple of days ago, I think 2 days ago, actually, Minister Merritt and I met with one company that is looking at making investments in this space, and we've met with a number of other proponents as well over the course of the last number of months.
Anything to add?
No, I think Minister Harrison has said it all. We did meet with the company, and there's been others as well that are looking at it. I know from my own experience, I've met with 3 different companies that are looking at opportunities. So we're working with them, and hopefully we can land them here in Saskatchewan.
Okay, thank you. Mike 4, go ahead.
Cheryl Barrett, Administrator of the RM of Martin and Assistant Administrator of the RM of Moosomin. Does the province have a strategy for rural airport infrastructure versus just repairs? The reason I ask is, in Moosomin, a local collaboration of entrepreneurs and RMs ranked a paved runway as a priority number 1. The key reasons being healthcare, stroke, children to Saskatoon, corporate investment, key regional accessibility by air. We want our rural communities to thrive, and we realize that this collaborative approach, but it doesn't always feel like the province is on our side.
Don, do you want to comment on that, or do you want me to? Or where's Fred? Fred. See? Just about switched it.
Well, thank you. And yes, we do have a program out there for the rural airports, and we've actually had quite an uptake on the rural airport program, where we will partner with the various different communities on the airports. As a former ag pilot, I certainly know that we need these airports around in our various rural communities. It's something that we are well aware of, and we have been working with the various different rural areas to be able to help and assist with the rural airports.
Just on that, there's an interesting thing going on in Moosomin on the ECDEV file, where there's some, I think, tremendous involvement by a number of employers in the area that are coming together to really prioritize what they see in their community, in their region, or what would advance investment, essentially. And quite often when you look at ECDEV, we all look at it as what can we attract, what new business can we attract to the community. And really, I think the focus that I see with the individual I met in this group was, how do we attract people that can work in our community and raise their family in our community? And so looking at it from the perspective of things like recreational centers, looking at it from the perspective of organized sports for children and young families that ultimately would move to your community. The airport piece does have a healthcare aspect to it in some areas of the community, in some areas of the province. We have STARS that has some broad coverage across the province, but I know being in the north, there's some areas where fixed wing aircraft are still necessary. The airports also have a role to play. As Saskatchewan grows with the investments that are arriving here, some of those larger global companies, BHP likely among them, Nutrien, these very significantly sized companies, when they have decision makers come in from time to time, they might come in by air. And so it may be time for us to join and have a strategic discussion on, where our significant airports are in the province and what they are actually doing in serving not just the community where they're located, but the broader region around that location. We have Saskatoon, Regina, we have Prince Albert, Moose Jaw, Yorkton, and a few others, but we might want to have a geographical look at what our airport infrastructure is across the province, and I can't think of a better individual to do that than our pilot in cabinet, Fred Bradshaw. Everett, a comment on STARS as well on the healthcare side?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, and thanks for the question. Actually, Minister Bradshaw and myself had a meeting with representatives from Moosomin back earlier this past fall, organized by MLA Stephen Bonk there, just to raise this very issue from a number of different perspectives and specific to the rural healthcare providing that's done by the community of Moosomin and the area it serves. That is an important area for us as government. We have to take a look at it from that perspective and that angle and to look at, what does that area serve in terms of healthcare. That includes, road ambulance, air ambulance, STARS, accessibility to the community, and making sure that the residents of Moosomin area have the ability to access the healthcare that they need. So we're looking at it from that lens as well. We had a very good meeting when we met this past fall, and I know we're taking a look at some options there and some potential ideas here for the future. So thanks for raising the question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mike 1, go ahead.
Malcolm Herman, RM35. Yeah, I'm not one to turn down money, and I don't think anybody else in this room either. But on the other hand, when I see our SGI pumping out $90+ million, I'm not sure why they're charging that in the first place and what the cost of checks are to mail all this money out when we got highways and we got health care and hospitals that need money. Let's not charge it if we can pay it back. Let's put it into something more constructive like hospitals or nursing homes or highways. That's how I feel about this. And Mr. Bradshaw, you should drive down 47 north of Estevan. And that's not the only highway in the province, but let's put our money to better use than charging it and then giving it back to the people. And this isn't the first time this has happened, so I don't know why SGI keeps doing this.
Thanks very much for the question. I'm going to let Fred speak to the general issue of highways in just a minute, but the money that's in the auto fund...
Can't hear you.
The money that's in the auto fund doesn't belong to the government. It belongs to the people that put it in there by rates. By what they paid for in their license plates. There's investment return on it, so it's expected to be returned to those people either by way of paying out premiums or claims or by a refund back to the people. We felt that this was a good time to make an investment in the individuals in the province that were coming out of COVID, so we made a flat fee of $100 for everybody that has had a licensed vehicle as of March 9th. So it's not that it's available money for roads or whatever else. It must go back to those that paid it or be directly related to something that is part of SGI's business. So I appreciate the point, but it's not something that fund was ever designed for. That's the people's money, and it's by way of an investment back to them. But I'll let Fred speak to highways in a more general sense.
But if the money's there, let's just lower the rates.
Well, if the money's there, we don't say, well, we'd like to take money for something else. It's because of low claims, because of pandemic, high investment return, but the money belongs to the people that have paid the premiums for it.
Yes, and as far as the highways end, we have worked hard at working on our highways. We've invested $10.6 billion since we were fortunate enough fortunate enough to become government. And I think as people around here have noticed, we've been working on highways all across the province, and we've got 26,000 kilometers of highways within this province to look after. So we are doing our best to prioritize where that money should be spent on the various different highways. You know, we look at the economic opportunities, and as we had said before in our growth plan that the Premier brought forward before, by 2030, we want to improve 10,000 kilometers of highways, and we're actually on track to do that. We did 1,350 kilometers of highways this year. And I know that everybody wants a primary highway built past their place, and they want it built right now. But we can only do so much. But we're working hard, and I think we've made a big investment in the province since we have had the pleasure to form government. Thank you.
I would just like to say one thing. I'm not saying anything against our highway workers that are working on the highway, but they must, or they should have a little bit of training, because Highway 47 north of Estevan is not much better than driving down a railroad track, because they're fixing these roads where the cracks are, and it's just like driving on a bunch of speed bumps. And I think they could be shaved off better or do whatever, and maybe our people need a little more training, but I'm not picking on them, but we don't need to be driving on speed bumps. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. The Premier has one more comment.
Yeah, I'll just clarify a little bit on the SGI rebate. The SGI Auto Fund has a minimum and maximum value. If it falls below the minimum, there's decisions the government needs to make so that we have that in that sweet range, so to speak. It has gone over the maximum a couple of times in the last year or so. The reason behind that, as Don explained, was there's fewer accidents. Over the course of the past 2 years, people have driven less, and there's fewer accidents on the road, and the investment income has been up. So that fund has grown beyond the maximum 2 different occasions now. It does fluctuate by the hundreds of millions in a very short period of time, and so it's not available for government to use for highways and any other source. It's up essentially because of the investment environment that we have today, and so we have one choice essentially, is to return the dollars to the people that have vehicles and paid, or we could lower rates. But given the fluctuations in the investment environment, given the fact that we expect people to be driving more as we find our way out of this pandemic, we could lower them for 1 year, and then we would have to increase them quite likely just as quickly. And so what we decided on 2 different occasions was just to redistribute the money to the people that license vehicles in the province.
Okay, thank you. Mike 3, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moe. Norm Hall, 307. Back in 06 and 07, we started looking at the Surface Rights Act. And then in 08, when oil crashed, that was put on the back burner because, and to quote the then Premier at the time, we didn't want to hurt the oil companies. Oil's back up. That act is over 50 years old. It's way out of date. It needs to be updated to protect the landowners that are sitting in this room and that are constituents of ours, to protect their investment in their land. So I hope you'll be looking at that. Also, RCMP just received a 24% increase in their wages, retroactive 4 years. I know you're in discussions with the federal government on who's going to pay the 4-year retroactive. I was wondering if you could tell us where we are in that, and hopefully we don't see it on our bill.
Us neither. Bronwyn, do you want to go first?
Yeah. On the surface right. Try this one. Is that better? Okay. Yep. So on the Surface Rights Act, it's a good opportunity to announce today, and we had wanted to here at SARM, that we are going to start consultations at the end of the month, broad consultations with landowners, SARM, the oil companies, of course, the Surface Rights Board itself. We recognize that the legislation has been on pause since 2014. Of course, there have been a lot of reasons for that. We had brought the legislation forward that
at that time, and then prices crashed, and really the headwinds that the energy sector has faced since then have been pretty ceaseless. I think we can agree, but it's always been a matter of timing. It's always been a balance between competitiveness and autonomy, and of course the interests of landowners. So we think it's a good time. Prices are still volatile despite the fact that they're up. There's still a lot of companies that are dealing with debts and capital allocations on pause and everything else. But all that said, the consultations that we're going to do are going to include looking at compensation, looking at suspending rights of entry based on certain conditions, and just, access onto land and how that looks when companies haven't been paying rents for a certain number of times. So we're moving forward on that, as I say, at the end of the month.
Thank you, Minister.
And Minister Tell.
The famous line of this last couple of years is, "Can you hear me?" I'm on mute.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much for the question. The provincial, your government is of the belief that the retroactive pay that has resulted with the signing of the new bargaining agreement between Canada and the RCMP is the responsibility of the federal government. We've had a number of conversations with respect to this retroactive pay increase, and quite frankly, and being absolutely blunt about it, we have heard nothing from them. So anyway, I think all of us can agree here that, and we were aware that the RCMP were lagging behind their counterparts with respect to salary increments. And so we are of the belief that the current salary under the new CBA is something that's in line and reasonable in the policing world within the country of Canada. The retroactive pay increase is not something we believe we are responsible for as a province, or some of the municipalities that have direct agreements with the Government of Canada and the RCMP. So we will continue researching and trying to have conversations with our federal counterparts. And I must leave you with this, that if any of you ever try to get a hold of my office and no one responds, because probably some of you know how it feels, that we're trying to get something done, something agreed to with our federal counterparts. We were not part of this particular bargaining with the federal government and the RCMP. And we were only advised after it was finished what it is currently. So just so you know, that it's extremely frustrating to not have any collaboration with the Government of Canada in this regard.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go to Mike 2. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Ray. John Wagner, RM of Piapot. Premier Moe, thank you and your cabinet for coming to our convention to give us an opportunity to ask you questions. I have a question regarding the tender for the Saskatchewan Individual Digital Identity Roadmap and what this roadmap entails. We were told that it's no big deal, just combining driver's license, health cards, etc. And when Rebel News asked more for the details through the Freedom of Information Act, they were informed that it would cost over $15,000 as it involved photocopying 49,750 pages of information. Now, 49,750 pages of information from January 2020 to present on what's supposed to be a simple app. This has the appearance that someone's trying to hide something. We live in a time where trust in government is not that high.
We've seen the COVID crisis where you can call it a health emergency and you can mandate just about anything. The Freedom Convoy, call it an emergency, you can seize private property, freeze bank accounts, and arrest people in a peaceful protest. I'm not certain that the MLAs or anyone is aware of what the tender is really asking for. And it would be nice for the minister in charge to look further into this to assure people that this is not something similar to what China is using for their social credit program. The alternative is to wait for Rebel News to finish their investigation, which will happen as they're doing a fundraiser as we speak. So, thank you.
Thanks, John. Just a few points there. Obviously, we realize we live in uncertain times and people are concerned about their privacy, and rightly so. That's why the Privacy Commissioner has been engaged and will continue to be engaged all along every step of the way with this. One of the things in government we hear, and you've all experienced it, is complaints about delays in signing up for government programs, acquiring government services. You've all experienced sitting on hold, waiting for a call back or waiting for somebody to talk to you. What the intent of this is to merely be able to expedite that process so that we're moving more and more online as technology improves. And as you mentioned, this is it's a virtual ID, driver's license, if you will, birth certificate online. It's not going to be mandatory. It's going to be voluntary if you wish to use it. Otherwise, you can go the conventional route. We will be engaged where the RFP's out, as you said. There's been no contractual arrangements on that decided yet. I will continue to be engaged to make sure privacy is protected. Once again, I understand the concern about it, but it's not mandatory. It's going to be voluntary only for people who wish to use it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And go to mic number 4.
Gary Ratke, Meadow Lake, 588. Assessed values have dropped in lakeshore development, and residentials have pretty much stayed the same. I suggested to council that we divide this into 2 separate categories. I was told we are not allowed to do this. We have to use the same mill rate for lakeshore development as we do for residential. As it stands, I understand cities have the right to divide this into 2 categories. Why do cities have the right to divide this into 2 categories and RMs do not?
Thanks for that. Thanks for that question. I'm going to take a crack at it, and I have some really good government officials sitting up here in front of me that can, if I'm not quite accurate on the information I give you, we can certainly talk after. But the subdividing classes in the city is done because of the volume that that have been subdivided. The problem when you start doing it in rural communities is you really get a small group. If you're to subdivide, for example, a resort facilities, resort residences, it's a very, very small grouping then. It's the same as businesses in a lot of RMs. I mean, I know a lot of RMs and even smaller urbans have asked for subdividing within their jurisdiction. But when you start subdividing a small number into an even small number, it can really distort the taxation collections. So, I'm going to leave it there before I say more that may not be accurate. And I would be glad to talk to you after and have some officials with me to clarify it. But that is certainly what I have learned in the year and a half that I've been the minister.
Okay. Okay, thanks for the question and the answer. Okay, I'll go back to number 1. Go ahead.
RM of Rosedale, Harold Dick, Councillor for Division 6. You'll have to excuse me if I get a little bit of fumble-mouthed here, but I'm not used to standing up here in front of a bunch of, intelligent guys up there.
Don't forget the ladies.
And ladies, of course. Pardon me. Highways. I am at, like I said, Rosedale. Hanley is in the center of that municipality. We have two huge fertilizer distribution plants, and a lot of commuting traffic. And so there's a lot of semis going on the 764 up to the 11 and turn either way, or even just cross it. Besides all the ag semis that haul grain up and down there. And yet at that intersection of Highway 11 and 764, they finally installed one light so people could see it in the dark. And yet when you go up the road where there's intersections or crossings that aren't really no towns, nothing else, they have 3 lights. I know that sounds petty, but I've come home from Regina lots of times, and when that light wasn't there, and even with that one light, is not actually enough. So I'm not sure why we can't have better lighting. And on the other hand too, another thing is, with all the traffic of the trucks turning onto the highway, it gets a little dangerous. We need some off-ramps and on-ramps. And like, I don't want to have many accidents happening there or deaths, and then we finally do something. I would like to have us do something now. And Hanley is a big center. And there are no lights in the median or on the other side of the highway to light it. Sure, you can see Hanley, but you go to Dundurn, well, there's a dozen lights lighting that place up, and a lot of other intersections. Like there's all the way to Saskatoon. I drive up and down there as a profession, and I'm a little sad that everybody's forgotten about Hanley and those fertilizer plants.
It's a good question on intersection safety, and been a priority for this government for a number of years now. With about $65 million, I think we've invested in intersection safety in the last 5 years. So Fred, I don't know if you know that particular intersection or want to engage on this.
Yes, as the Premier said, we have been working very hard on the safety aspect all over the province. That's why we've been putting in passing lanes in various different places. We've been working on the intersection, as the Premier said, the intersection safety all over the province. This is something that is very important to us. I don't know exactly where you are talking. Like, I mean, I guess I've driven through there. I realize that. But what we do have is we have officials here who would be very happy to meet with you, and we can take a look at this and try and move forward on it. But safety is something that we have been very concerned about all across the province, and like I said, we've been working on it. It's something that really came into being after the Broncos bus crash, which happens to be in my constituency, and this is something that's very important. As I said before, we've spent $10.6 billion on highways since we were privileged to form government, and we want to continue to move the province forward on our highways.
And I appreciate that, and I wouldn't want to be sitting up there to answer these questions like you guys are and telling us these things, but we've been at it for about 5 years already. That is a 4-lane major highway from Regina to Saskatoon and further north, and there is a lot of traffic there, and so I think it's very important. I might see you at the room yet too.
Yeah, Harold, would I ask you at the end of the bear pit to come forward and talk to Fred and his officials so he can find the precise intersection and they'll have a look at it?
Well, I'm going to go to the discussion room and meet with them there, I think.
Oh, okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
I'd just as soon not go up there.
That's...
Okay. Okay, thanks for the question. I'll go to Mike 3. Go ahead. You're up there, Mike 3.
Wanatoy Wallace, 243. My question is to Fred Bradshaw. I brought this question forth 2 conventions ago to the minister who was in Ottenbright on rural crime watch signs. We have to put those signs up on the back slope of highways. You had to drive over to Alberta and they're right on the side of the road where all the other signs are. And I was assured then that the policy would be looked at. Never heard a word about it. I posted that same question at the virtual convention last year. Never heard nothing again, so I certainly would like to hear something today. Also, while I'm here, to the person that spoke about 47 Highway, maybe the minister should drive down 47 from Springside to Good Spirit Lake. That's a goat trail. Thank you.
So just to clarify, right now, we were asking you to put rural crime watch signs on existing signposts, is that correct?
I'm asking that the rural crime watch signs go up on the side of the highway where all the other signs are.
Okay. Yeah, you look at that, Fred.
You know, the rural crime watch signs, it's something that we're going to have to look at. I'll talk to my officials about it, and this is something that's, I guess, is a little bit new to me. So I really don't know. I haven't had it raised in my office. So I know that's not maybe the answer you want, but I'll certainly find out about it, and we'll work towards that. And you know, like, I mean, as I said, we have been spending a lot of money on the highways, and we work very hard on prioritizing what highways need to be done, and it's a shifting thing. Like, I mean, we have both a 5-year and a 10-year plan going forward, but you know, sometimes those plans can change depending on exactly what the economic activity is and the traffic counts are going in that areas. Thank you.
We'll have a look at the policy around the signs.
Okay, thanks for the
We'd like
question.
to see those signs on the side of the highway because they are traffic guidance signs. They're telling the criminals keep on driving because we're watching.
Okay, thanks. Mike 2.
John Rickman, RM Argyle. I have a comment and then a question for Sask Power. My comment is to Mr. Moe on his patting Mr. Trudeau on the back for stopping importing Russian crude oil, which we haven't imported since 19. But I believe we're still importing processed petroleum products from Russia. Somebody should maybe fact check that. I'm not going to say that I'm 100%, True North or somebody like that. My comment is, or my question is on we're going to have to shut down our coal-powered energy by 2030, and I'm wondering what the government is planning on doing, since we have probably the cleanest coal plant at Shan at Estevan that the federal government won't even recognize anything that's been done there to take CO2 out of the atmosphere. Since what's going on in Europe with the relying on another jurisdiction for energy, I would hope Saskatchewan doesn't fall into that, and we can look at some kind of nuclear or something where we don't have to rely on another province to supply our power.
Warren, you want to comment on that?
You make a couple of really good points on the power side of it. The plant that is there now, not only does it produce clean energy, it also provides CO2 that is sequestered underground and is used for a variety of purposes, most notably enhanced oil recovery. We are pleased with the progress that is made with that, but we're also very aware of what the federal government is doing with the regulations. I would urge you to write a letter to the federal government and say, we need to do a better variety of things that they've got, give us some more options. But to answer your question more specifically, we have not taken anything off the table for electrical generation in our province and are working with a variety of different options. But right now we have wind, solar, geothermal, peat moss, many things that we're trying to work on. The reality of it is there's only a few things that give reliable, good baseload power. Coal, natural gas are the two that we rely on the most right now. We are enhancing our ability to generate electricity with natural gas. It would be great if we could continue to use coal for an extended period beyond that, and we're in regular contact with our federal counterparts. They keep changing the ministers, and we keep finding ministers that are less and less receptive to coal. but we are going to continue to duke that one out with them. We've got a 300-year supply of coal in our province. It would be great if we can continue to use it. So thanks for the question, and we will continue to stay in touch with, stay in tune for watching for options as we go forward.
If I can. I would just add a little bit as well to that. Unfortunately, those decisions that are in fact impacting Estevan and Coronach certainly are out of our hands, which is a little bit frustrating. But what we have done as a provincial government have developed a coal transition fund, which I'm sure in that area you may be aware of, but just kind of telling the rest of the delegates that it's a $10 million coal transition fund. About $8 million will go to Estevan, $2 million will go to the Coronach area to help those communities transition from the reliance, and really what those communities for the most part were built up on is the coal and the generation of power through coal. So it is a transition fund that the community leaders in those areas can access to help them transition away from a commodity that through the federal government is saying is no longer usable here in Canada.
I'll just add.
Sorry, Bronna.
Sorry, no, I'll just add to that. I mean, when we announced the CCS priorities in the fall, we were very clear, and I was very clear, that we stand by enhanced oil recovery. I mean, enhanced oil recovery, you can't edit enhanced oil recovery out of the CCS discussion, and I know, you know, the federal government is trying to do that. It has an amazing environmental record. 82% fewer emissions come out of EOR than comes out of traditional extraction. You know, you can't get to net zero, and that's leading environmentalists saying that, without EOR CCS. So it has an amazing role to play, and that's why we've stood by it. To the point about the Southeast and transition, I mean, here we are in a situation where it's mandated federally to get off coal, and yet we've talked to communities in the Southeast who have yet to meet with anyone from the federal government, and have asked for meetings with federal ministers to talk about what that transition actually looks like for communities and workers in rural communities. And I find that, you know, pretty questionable that all these consultations are going on without including rural voices as part of what that transition means. So I think when we talk about just transition and we hear about it federally and elsewhere, that's sort of it on the ground in microcosm, and I think there are a lot of things there that really need to be paid attention to in terms of what that means for real communities and workers. And the cynicism out there when you start hearing about coal, and someone referenced Europe, you know, it was a uniquely windless year last year in Germany and Britain. So what's happening? Germany's ramping up coal. No wonder communities and workers and families in the Southeast are frustrated when they hear about that. So we just have to keep sounding the alarm about what transition means for real people.
And I guess if I could, oh, there we are. If we could just add one more part to our electrical generation puzzle here, and that's SMRs. And the development that we're going to have, and the focus and work that we're going to be putting into small modular reactors coming up into the future, we do believe that we realize we need a dependable, clean, emissions-free base load power source. And that's what we believe SMRs or nuclear energy is going to be providing us in the province. I mean, we're the world's source of uranium. We have a very extensive uranium industry that's evolved in this province. And I think I would just encourage you to stay tuned. We've got some interesting developments on SMR work that's going to be announced here in the next few weeks. So just to show how serious we are around the SMR development in this province.
I'll make a couple of very short comments, probably much more blunt than any of the comments that have been made thus far. To all of those that want to phase out coal, to all of those that want to increase carbon taxes, to all of those that want additional regulatory requirements for our oil and gas industry, here's a snapshot of what that means. $1.80 gas and going higher. That's what it means. It means you'll phase out of coal and your energy costs will go higher. not just in Saskatchewan, but across Canada. And so ultimately where we are in Saskatchewan is all of our options are on the table, in particular in Coronach and Estevan, where we have an incredible amount of transmission infrastructure going into those communities. And what we actually need in the next couple of years is a change of federal government. I told Ray I would say that because he probably shouldn't.
We're nonpartisan, remember? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, back to Mike 4.
Pamela Bartlett with the permission of council to speak. To the Minister of Highways, Ceres Global Ag is building a canola crushing plant at Northgate, which is also a border crossing. Highway number 9 South has been in a state of disrepair for some time. After numerous letters after letters and nothing has happened, it has yet even been taken off the high priority list or the 5-year list. You talk about building the economy, this is proof right here. Ceres is a huge contributor of the economy and jobs and can't even get a good piece of pavement for the trucks hauling on the road to drive on. During construction and after, here's the stats. The $440 multi-million-dollar state-of-the-art plant will be in operation in late 2024, early 25. At the peak of construction, they expect to have 350 to 500 people working there on any given day. Currently, there are 80 trucks per day, and on a busy day, 140 trucks. After construction, there will be 60 full-time staff added, which is up from the 40 full-time staff currently. Once the plant is open, there will be 100 to 120 trucks per day on average, and on a busy day, 225 trucks. There will be 26,000 rail cars filled per year, up from 7,000. So lastly, please build number 9 highway, not now, not later, or now, not later. It's long overdue.
Well, thank you for that question. And yes, we are looking at it's not just Northgate. We have quite a few projects that are coming on stream within the province where we are going to have to be looking at from the highways end of it at the infrastructure that we're going to be putting on there. As I said before, we're on a 5 and a 10-year plan, but especially the 5-year plan. It's definitely movable, and we look around and see where the economic activity is going to be. So when we have these plants coming online, it is definitely something that Highways is looking at, because you're right, we need the transportation, and in Saskatchewan, with the growth in our agriculture sector, with all the crushing plants coming on stream, as the Premier had mentioned, we have to be looking at this so we can move the product around as needed, because it's obvious we can't, at the present time, rely on the rail lines all that well. So I'll just throw that out there. So thank you very much for that, and it's certainly something we'll be looking at.
With the investment that we've been announced the last year, it is shifting some of the traffic plans in our province. And this is an example of where I think back to years ago, we had a number of value-added facilities show up north of Yorkton, and we had some challenges that we worked with the RM on Grain Millers Road with some of the traffic going into that area. This is another example where there's going to be a shift in traffic to I think as what will become and already is a significant piece of our export-based infrastructure at Northgate, understanding that it actually employs or is serviced by a third international railroad in Burlington Northern, or BNSF, coming into that facility, and I think that opens up even a broader conversation for this province, given where we are even this week.
Okay, thank you. Mike 1, go ahead.
Terry Hildebrand, RM 181 Langenburg. I too would like to take the Premier's direction and put my call to Minister Bradshaw on highways. We were very delighted when our MLA, Minister Kading, informed us that the 12 miles between Langenburg and Highway 22 were scheduled for crushing of the product this year and then resurfacing in 2023. However, by attending an East Central meeting, we were kind of disappointed to learn that there was no
shoulders being planned for this highway. This highway is very busy. It services 3 potash mines. The amount of grain that's coming over there. I should also say there was an appreciation in the plan for a turning lane at the Provincial Park that is also along there, but it's dangerous without the shoulders. And this road, as many other roads, was built, and if you dig in it, you find willows and black dirt. And if you don't do the right amount of capping on it in 2 years, Highway 80, and Minister Kading can relate to these roads, Highway 80 was done 3 years ago. It has equal amount of traffic, maybe less, and it's already faltering. So we appreciate it, and the 10 billion or 10 million spent, there's a little bit of thought has to go into how it's spent. If you just do that on number 8 with no shoulders, in 2 years you're back to the same thing. And it's dangerous. We've got campers, 200 people living at that lake, trucks, the gravel going into the mine. The potash revenue has been extreme in this province over the years. And that particular piece, when you go south of there, there's shoulders. But that 13 miles has no shoulders, and it just needs, I know the tenders haven't been out yet.
30 seconds.
The tenders haven't been out yet, but I appreciate you reevaluating this chunk of road and the requirements for it.
Well, thank you for that, and you know, it's always nice to hear from people who actually live right in the area, and it's something we will certainly take a look at, and thank you for your comments.
Yeah, I've lived on that highway all my life, and you can see I'm not that old. But I'm not much older than Minister Kading, but it's been resurfaced 4 or 5 times in my lifetime, and 2 or 3 years later, it's completely done. There's just traffic. 2 of our biggest farmers in the province live along that road, so all the inputs to the field in spring, and then the grain goes back, the gravel to the mines, the traffic coming up to go to Yorkton and Bungie, that 12 miles needs to be addressed differently this time than it has been in the past.
Okay, we're going to have to move on, but thanks for the question. We're supposed to be done this by noon, but I will only take one more speaker probably from each mic, and that'll be it. So I'll go to 3.
Good morning. It's Tim Brote, RM 158. I was pleased to hear that more resources are going to be putting to crime prevention in the province, and the White Butte RCMP had a 6-month pilot project to do online criminal record checks. The fees were waived, and now as the beginning of March, this program has ended. Is there any thoughts of expanding this program so that all of the province can take part of it, so it'll make it a little bit easier for the Rural Crime Watch groups to get their record checks done for their executive?
Sorry, I like to look at whoever is speaking, but anyway. We will take that back to the RCMP here in Regina, and we'll get back to you. Someone will take your name, Tim Brote, and we'll get back to you once we have conversations with the RCMP. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, mic 2.
Kristen Gillis with the RM of Argyle, number 1. I just have a question about the dugout pipeline and well rebate program. My husband and I, we farm in the southeast corner, and we're just 2 35-year-olds just starting out, and we have a herd of 40 cows, and we both work full-time off the farm to fund our little hobby farm. And we obviously had a dry year. It was, I've seen parts of the bottom of the creek that I've never seen before, and I've lived there my whole life. And we put in an off-site watering system that cost us about $7,500 to put in, and got water for our cows, which is very important. And we went to apply for this particular program, and the cap that you have to make minimum is $50,000. And I looked on my taxes, and I made $47,000 last year. And I tried to see if they would give us some leeway, and they said no, because they don't want to set a precedence. And, you know, I get that. I appreciate that. However, I just wondered, because it's such a dry year last year, and in case we don't get some moisture this year, Is it possible to maybe evaluate that cap? This is obviously for the Minister of Agriculture, but is it, can we lower that cap for those of us that make 50,000 or less? We're just as important as the bigger farmers, and someday I'm going to be sitting in your guys' chair too, so I want to be able to
Okay.
I want to be able to get there, and if we can't keep farming, we're not going to get there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Keep her farming.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I look forward to you sitting in my chair too. So it's good, and I understand your concern. The threshold was set there for a reason, right? It was really to capture that. And when we look at the program every year, and even this year with the drought, I mean, it was well in excess of $20 million that was put just in the extension program, and it's oversubscribed. We know that there's a lot of ranchers out there that are still trying to access water. I sympathize with your concern on the threshold, but the threshold was set at that, and that's where it's at. Would we look at it? You know, I can't say whether we would look at moving it now because of the drought. I think it's something we'd have to look at down the road, but it was set there for a reason to really support the primary ag industry, and that was your primary source of income. That's why.
Okay, thank you. Mike 4.
Yes. Roger Kinzel from the RM of Rostern 403. My question to you is, I worked all over Western Canada and as far east as Toronto in my career. And I'm just wondering why we can't do a better way of promoting our province. Boundary Dam, which we know is one of the most efficient and minimal environment impact in North America, and we never hear much about that. We don't fight back like we should. Our potash is the same way. All the new mines that we're building right now, they're probably going to be the cleanest in the world. Another thing is our uranium. I've been up north to every mine that's out there and helped build them. Why aren't we looking at a way to maybe take some of the product that's left over and take it back up there? It makes so much sense. There's nobody up there. These mines are open. Rabbit Lake is going to be shut down pretty soon. I don't understand why we're not doing more and fighting for this province that we have here and telling the rest of the country how great a
30
place
seconds.
we are.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I agree. I think we have been doing you know, as much as we can in days gone by, up to and including taking the federal government to the Supreme Court of Canada on various initiatives, and I don't know that we're finished with that if the current government is going to stay there for a period of time. But all of your points that you mentioned are exactly right. We've rolled those into essentially our marketing strategy from Saskatchewan for the products that we have that we sell all over the world. You know, Boundary Dam you mentioned, where we have CCS or carbon capture and storage, which is only part of the story, is taking that carbon from that coal-fired power plant. The second part of that story is the enhanced oil recovery piece, where they are taking that carbon and putting it down a number of oil wells up in the Weyburn-Midale area, and ultimately extending the life of an oil field in that area, producing oil at a lower carbon content than most other oil that is produced. That is the rest of the story, and that is where we run into challenges with federal policy and a number of their programs where they will not fund or will not participate in any carbon and capture and storage project that's on coal. They'll look at it on natural gas potentially or other fuels, but they won't look at it on coal. They will not look at any participation if that carbon is actually going into an enhanced oil recovery scenario, which is actually making a difference if you're concerned about climate change. And it most certainly is making a difference to the bottom line for the government through royalties, as there's a harvest bump. But it's also making a difference to the income that's coming in to communities. With respect to uranium and agriculture, we're really at the core something Everett Hindley worked on as Legislative Secretary to the Minister of Trade and Export on our Sustainable Saskatchewan logo that we continue to use with the over 100 countries that we sell products to each and every year. I was on the phone earlier this week. It was in a follow-up to an omnibus letter that our Minister of Finance, our Deputy Premier, had written to the Deputy Prime Minister, essentially airing most of our grievances in this area that you have identified. If we are truly going to move forward and achieve anywhere near what the federal government wants to achieve in any net carbon conversation, net anything around carbon, it's going to include Saskatchewan. It needs to include what we are doing in the way of enhanced oil recovery with the carbon that we're capturing off of there. It needs to include what we're doing with the methane action plan and the investments that are being made up between North Battleford and Lloydminster, and how we are actually helping Canada achieve their methane reduction targets that we have. It needs to recognize what we are doing in our uranium mining and how that is replacing coal-fired facilities, yes, but natural gas facilities and other facilities all around the world, far beyond our borders. We're looking seriously at building some small modular reactors here in Saskatchewan, one, to support that industry, two, because it is baseload power that we ultimately need. We haven't brought coal and carbon capture and storage off the table by any stretch, but we are going to need a different federal government in order for that to be realistic into the future, and I trust that that will happen in the not too distant future. But any net carbon conversation in Canada involves Saskatchewan agriculture, and it can't move forward